Hello! I bought some books, as you can see here, and this video ended up being quite a long one. I'm going to flip through them all briefly and then do some art-related activities in them. All of these books can be found on Amazon, and I'll link them in the description below, but I actually found these in a local bookstore, and it's very hard to resist things that are right in front of me. So grab a cuppa, sit back and relax, and let's get into it! First up is Watercolor With Me in the Forest by Dana Fox. Now this book's been out since 2018 and I'm sure you've seen it around, and there's bound to be lots of videos on it. The whole book is made out of watercolor paper and it is designed for beginners. So each page spread has the instructions and the picture on the right hand side, and then you paint on the left hand side following the instructions, or in my case probably not following them very well, but we'll get to that. It's a really nice book, and the paper feels fantastic. It's nice and thick, and I think it's about 300 GSM. It's not cotton paper, but it actually holds watercolour pretty well nonetheless. And this one is forest themed, with lots of plants and animals in it. On the activity side is a very basic light line drawing, so that you can paint over it and you don't have all the lines showing. And then there's also a practice page, which I've already done here, you can see. And there are chapters with different techniques, like wet on dry is the first chapter, then there's wet on wet, and there's also line and wash at the end of the book from what I remember. There's a colour chart for the palette that's used in the book, and I'm pretty sure she's using Winsor & Newton Cotman paints. But of course I have to use professional paints because I'm a watercolour snob, and I've got out my Schmincke Horodam palette because I've filled this thing completely, and I have a wide range of colours, including ones to match the recommended colour palette in the book. And yes, I need to fill up some of these pans because they are starting to run low. This is a mishmash of little tubes that I've collected over time. I bought a whole bunch on a closing down sale at an art shop, so they were pretty cheap by comparison to what they normally are. I've already started painting in this book. Here is the first page. The acorns were what you were meant to paint, but it was a bit boring, so I added in those leaves as well. And you can see how bright and vibrant these Schmincke Horodam paints are on this particular paper as well, so they look really fantastic. On the next page I painted in the caterpillar. Mine's a bit brighter than the examples, and all of the yellow is my paint, including the right hand side. I decided to paint a yellow circle around the back. I think what bothers me is all of that space left over on the page. It feels like I'm not getting my money's worth. But on this page I did just paint the leaves, and I used sap green and burnt umber. I felt like this looked quite nice on its own, and I didn't want to smudge the leaves by painting in a background because it's just too busy, so I just left that one minimalistic. But in true Becky style, I can't possibly follow the rules for long. So here is a leaf that I painted behind the ladybird, and I've added in some white pen highlights as well. And flipping over, I've got one more. I painted in the plant, and then I added in some whimsical little bees because I just wanted to fill up the space. I really should have put the paints down as swatches so I can say which ones I used in addition to their swatches. And that's where I was up to, so now I'm going to paint this one with you, and I'm starting off by adding a bit of wet on wet here, even though this is supposed to be wet on dry. And I somewhat followed their colour palette, but I did end up adding quite a lot more magenta into mine and some purple as well. So for me, this book is not really about learning because it is a beginner's book, and for me it feels a bit basic because I've done all this, for years. But that doesn't mean I know everything, and it's always a good chance to practice honing my skills, and maybe I will learn something new as I'm doing this. I'd had it on my Amazon wishlist for ages, but I just couldn't really justify buying it. But when I saw it in QBD Bookshop, which is an Australian bookstore, it was right in front of me, and I just went, you know what, I'm getting it, because I actually really liked the feel of the paper, and it was nice to be able to handle the book and flip through it before I bought it. I love to buy books in bookshops. Always that tactile experience is important. I layered up the paint so you can really see how the Schmincke Horodam paints build up in colour and luminosity over time. Usually the first layer they're a little bit pale, but once you add a second or third layer on, they become really saturated and vibrant. They're gorgeous paints, I do recommend them. They're definitely in the top 5 watercolour paint brands, in my personal opinion. I really enjoy them. It took me a while to warm to them though. When I first had a small set of them, I wasn't sure if I liked them, but they've really grown on me over the years and I can appreciate their loveliness. I'd love to know in the comments if you have this book. I know it's pretty popular out there. I think there are a couple of others in this series, and I might end up buying those at some point, but I think I'll probably try and work through this book first, and then I'll pick up the others on Amazon or somewhere. Maybe the bookstore will stock those at some point. You know I couldn't leave that background blank, so I'm painting in a very loose background around the flowers with cobalt turquoise. This is such a stunning colour, especially in the Schminker range. You know I love this colour if you watched my previous video when I was sent Cobalt Teal Blue by Daniel Smith in their gouache range, and that's just as gorgeous. But this particular cobalt turquoise is really bright and gorgeous. I added in other colours that I'd used for the flowers just to bring the whole thing together, and then I decided the flowers needed a black outline because I'd lost a lot of definition with the red paint in particular. So I'm just kind of cartoonizing it a little bit and making it more of an illustration. And that's something to bear in mind if you're more of a beginner and you have this book. You don't have to stick with the instructions. You can add embellishments to it and make it your own. The instructions are there to help you get a painting, but of course you want to develop your own style as well, and it's so much fun to experiment and add to a particular painting because the ones on here are pretty basic and they do need a little bit more, in my opinion, just to make them look really great. You may disagree with me and just want to do exactly what the instructions say. That's perfectly fine as well. It's easier to do that when you're starting out, but it gets a bit boring following instructions, at least in my opinion. But I'm remembering now watching this back that one of my white pens decided to stop working mid-recording, you stupid thing. That's going in the bin, even though I don't think it's empty. For some reason it just completely stopped, so I had to get a new one out. It's just as well I have backups. But here's the finished painting. I really love how bright and colourful it is. You can see texture on that cold press paper, and I really like that too. Yeah, mine looks pretty different to that, but that's perfectly fine. I'm happy with that. And now to look at all 3 books in the reverse colouring book range. I couldn't just have one of them. I had been resisting these books for so long. They were a big trend on YouTube last year, so I'm way behind. But once again, being able to pick them up and touch them, I realised the paper is really nice, so I figured I might as well get them since they were all there. There's the original one, then there's Through the Seasons, which I think is book 2, and then the third book, which I'll be coming to now, is Mindful Journeys, and that's the third one in the series, if I'm not mistaken. I'm pretty sure this is the case because when I look on the back, it's got both books there. But in case you've missed this trend completely and are wondering what on earth is a reverse colouring book, well, we're going to find all of this out today. So basically, the picture is already there, and the idea is to draw the lines in with a pen. So it's kind of a doodling book, and they're meant to be abstract so that you can interpret them how you want to, like a Rorschach ink blot, and then draw whatever you want on them. So it could be Zentangles. This one in particular looks like flowers, so that's what I would probably draw. This also looks like flowers to me, but then other ones are far more abstract, like this one. I mean, that could be anything, just depending on whatever you happen to see in it. That's an upside down jellyfish, that's what I'm seeing immediately. The paper is wonderfully smooth, and I just really love the feel of it. It's nice and thick too. You could use fine liners, gel pens, probably even ballpoint pen in this, and then just let your imagination do the rest of it. I think almost every YouTube video I've seen has been in this colouring book, whereas the second and third books haven't been shown so much on YouTube. This is therefore a great opportunity for me to get a video out on the other 2 books as well, although I didn't end up flipping through every single page. But this season's book starts off with spring and has a colour palette that revolves around springtime colours. I was looking through that. Some of them are very abstract and I have no idea what I'm going to do. Here's summer. The colour palette's changing a bit here, and there are some completely random images. This next one is definitely a bouquet of flowers though. Some pages I'll see things immediately, and other ones I'll just think to myself, what am I going to do with that? Flipping through to autumn or fall if you're American or Canadian, the palette has changed to more autumnal colours, reds and browns and yellows, with a few other interesting colours in there just for a bit of a mix. So I really like this book too. There's even some Halloween pumpkins in there. But of course, I live in the southern hemisphere, so my seasons are completely opposite to most of you watching who live in the northern hemisphere. Winter, of course, is more blues and greys. I think I might save this book for a later time because I'm going to have to do multiple drawings to cover the seasons for both hemispheres, and I'll probably end up doing a picture from each season, something like that, so that's definitely a future video. But I am working in Mindful Journeys. This is the first one I bought, and then I found the other two a few days later, so I ended up buying them as well. This one's got some really cute drawings. I think this might be my favourite of the three books. And there is definitely quite a variety between the three books as well, which is nice if you want to end up with more than one book. They're not all the same. This one's definitely got some more mindful looking images. And if you're considering buying one of these books, hopefully my video is useful in helping you decide which one is best for you. Or you could be a greedy gannet like me and have all three. Ooh, peacock feathers. I really like the colour variety in this book, and the patterns are also quite different from each other. Which do you think is the best of the three books? Now I'll move to the front of this book and show you the ones that I've already done in here. There's a page here which gives you suggestions on how you might want to fill in the book, but the rest is up to you basically, and that's what I like. So here's the first one I did. It was an obvious mandala image surrounded by green. I outlined everything, and then I've added in lined patterns and some white dots with a white gel pen. I've even put some watercolour on here because, surprisingly enough, this paper holds watercolour pretty well, although you don't want to add too much water because it will start to buckle. But I'll flip it over and you can see it's held up nicely. There's just a little bit of buckling there. This next one is a mix of pen and watercolour as well. I could see flowers in the blobs, and some of the blobs in the background I've drawn those spirals on because I couldn't really see a particular shape. So it's a combination of flowers in the front, and then the rest are just blobs. Then I added in some watercolour just to really saturate some of those colours, and once again, not much buckling at all. This one was a crazy one, and I actually quite like how it's turned out. All of the spirals are colours that I've added in with watercolour. I also drew lines around some of the dots and made these funny squiggly lines, and then I've drawn a black line around all of the design and then gone around with yellow as well. The original colour palette was blue and purple. The yellow just brings everything out, and I'm really glad I added that on. So that one turned out well. This one was an obvious flower as well, a lotus, and so I've just ended up embellishing everything with extra lines, and I added in some white gel pen highlights, and these tiny pen flowers are mine too. It's such a relaxing activity. I have been thoroughly enjoying this book, and I'd started on this page. I hadn't finished it at this point, although I have now. I've actually done quite a lot in this book since I've recorded this, and I'm absolutely hooked on this reverse colouring book at the moment. I've been drawing in it a lot during the evenings, especially when I'm watching some TV, and you can see this next page needs to be done. I've already done that one too. But I'm going to do one in the first reverse colouring book that came out, which I think all other YouTubers have done. I'm going to do the very first page because it's an obvious flower arrangement. I'm absolutely loving this Kuretake Fude pen in here. It just flows so smoothly. It's got a flexible nib, so you can get a fairly thin line, but also a thicker line as well if you press down on it. And I'm just getting straight into the drawing here. I really don't have a particular method for how to start a drawing. I just tend to go for the blob that stands out first to my eyes, no matter where that is in the picture. And I saw that green flower first, so that's where I started, and then I just work my way around the picture from there, usually going for the things that are most obvious first, and then getting to the more complicated bits later into it. There really is no right or wrong for this. It's just meant to be a bit of fun and a way to maybe get your mind to see something along with getting the creativity flowing. Now, I really love to colour in, so I have a lot of colouring books as well, the proper ones, but sometimes I just don't feel like it, but I want to do something that isn't a full artwork, like I might be really tired or stressed out, and I want to do something creative, but I just can't think of anything at the time. So the reverse colouring book, I just pick up a pen and start drawing, letting the lines flow out. It's such a good way to relax and de-stress. There's no pressure to draw anything in particular. You can just draw lines around the different coloured blobs and it will end up looking really pretty. If you like Zentangle, this is a really great way to Zentangle over the tops of colours, or you can just make it up as you go along, which is pretty much what I'm doing here. And you could probably see how I've picked out specific areas over others, and that's because that's what I'm seeing first. And then I see what's left and what else can I pick out of it. It's a methodical process, and you don't have to draw around every single blob either. You can leave some of it untouched, and that kind of fades into the background, bringing the pen lines forward. As you can probably see here, how the bits I haven't drawn around are kind of behind the bits that I have. And now I'm watching this, I could have left the bit that I'm drawing on now just completely untouched, and that would have looked really nice as a background. But at this point I'd gotten into the drawing frenzy, so pretty much everything gets outlined. I think I left a little bit, but the majority was drawn on. That's okay, I was having a lot of fun, so I'm perfectly fine with that. The feel of this particular brush pen on that smooth paper is very satisfying. It just flows so beautifully, and you can see how clean those black lines are. Using my new white gel pen, I decided to add some highlights as well, so white pen works really well, and I'm sure other colours would too, but I just decided to stick with black and white because this particular piece is colourful enough. I didn't use any watercolour on this, but I could if I wanted to. Just remember to not add too much water, just try and add only the paint with a tiny bit of water on the brush. You could use acrylic paint and gouache in here easily as well. As you can see on the left there are no rules. I know when I was a beginner, especially when it came to watercolour, I was quite worried about doing this, that and the other thing exactly as the teacher instructed or the book did, but as I've developed my style over the years and become more confident, I break the rules more and do whatever pleases me, and I hope that's the case for you. Let me know in the comments if you have any of these reverse colouring books. I really like how this turned out. It's fun and whimsical. The black ink is so lovely and dark on here, and the white's also a nice contrast with all of those highlights. A little bit of fun, not meant to be serious, and I did leave a little bit of colour in the background without outlining it. Going back to the book I'm actually working in, and I'd been looking at this one just going, what am I going to do with it? But an idea actually popped into my head while I was doing the other picture, and that is to draw hearts all the way down, so it's a heart explosion. I missed Valentine's Day this year when it came to putting out a video, so this is my very belated tribute to Valentine's Day. Happy Valentine's! And you can see here that this one is completely not what the drawing is, which is a bunch of rainbow swirls. I'm just adding in my own design over the top of it and incorporating the rainbows into the hearts. You will see this come together a bit more when I start to add in the white highlights, but to begin with it was a bit of a chaotic mess, and I was drawing around some of the darker circles, which you can see those paint splotches. I also drew a few hearts outside of the swirls just to kind of tie it in a bit together. And of course this ended up not being enough. You'll see what happens in a little while once I've done the main part of the drawing. But one thing I really wanted to mention is that some people will say these sorts of books are an absolute waste of time. I strongly disagree with that. I think they are fantastic for getting my creativity flowing. I'm an art YouTuber. I do this every single week, and I have to come up with art ideas. A lot of artists might do a few pieces in a year. I'm doing it so much more than that, and there is a huge amount of pressure to come up with ideas every single week. Sometimes I just have nothing, and that is really stressful. So I'll grab out a book like this and just start drawing, doing something, and often it will wake up an idea in my head like it did for this particular piece. You can see what I mean about the highlights starting to bring it together. The white space was making me anxious, so I figured I was going to fill it in with some watercolour. To begin with, I made a bit of a mess of it, and I was going, uh-oh, this may have been a really bad idea, and that pen is not completely waterproof, so I've got a bit of inky runoff there. Oopsie! But I just kept going anyway, because at this point I'm all in it now. And my idea was to continue the design over on the blank pieces of paper. So I managed to match up the paints. I'm using the Schminker once again, and I'm basically just drawing in a whole load more hearts over the top of the dried paint. It worked out really well. I got a little bit more buckling on this page because I had used more water than I anticipated, but otherwise it was perfectly fine and there were no issues. I could never have come up with this idea if I was just staring at a blank piece of paper. So having the prompt in the book just brought out all of this colour and joy, and I was able to produce a picture that I hadn't conceived of at the start of the day. So I've ended up with something that I've made, and that is a win in my book. I'm just finishing it off by adding white highlights to all of the hearts to tie in the whole lot together. At the moment for me, it's like the making of art is far more important than the end piece. Like, I don't care if I'm not making really serious artworks. And I know there will be people out there who watch my videos and just go, well, you're not an artist. But to that I say, check out my beautiful rainbow hearts. I bet you didn't do those today. I always get my critics, but I'm not too worried about that. I just still do what I like to do. As long as it makes me happy, that's all that matters. But I'd still love to know what you think of it. But Becky, you say, I don't want to spend money on reverse colouring books. Can I make it myself? Yes, you can. I'm going to make a reverse colouring page from scratch using some of my lovely Canson Moulin de Roy from my previous video because I still had the pad out. It is a nice smooth hot press paper, and here's hoping it works better than my camera focus at the moment. I've got my Schminke paints and I am just throwing colours on here. I picked out ones that appealed to me, and inspired by the first reverse colouring that I did, I'm going to make a very abstract bouquet. You can see the paints running into each other. That's perfectly fine. That adds to the fun of it, and you get some really interesting effects which you can draw around as well. If you wanted something even more abstract, you could blindly throw down blobs of colour. Here I am trying to make the stems of flowers, but otherwise I would just normally paint a whole load of stuff on there. I just wanted to make it a little bit easier on myself so I could see it straight away and be able to finish this picture fairly quickly so I could have it ready for the video. I'm using that same black Kuretake pen, and it worked really well on this hot press paper. I do recommend hot press just to have a nice smooth surface for your pens as well as the paint. A mixed media book would work as well, or anything like that. Even cold press will work. It will just be a bit more textured, just whatever you have really. And then just go to town drawing in those lines and having a good time. I thoroughly recommend trying this out. It's an activity that's suitable for all levels of ability, whether you're a beginner or more advanced. It's just a really great way to draw lines on a page and make a pretty picture out of some painty blobs. And who knows, it might spark your next greatest idea. Enough of my dramatics already. Here is the finished piece. I'm really happy with how it turned out. It was a lot of fun to do, and I thoroughly recommend trying out a reverse colouring page of your own. It's great to put in a sketchbook when you can't think of anything else. An alien bouquet of flowers. Well, that was a busy session. Here are the 2 reverse colouring pages that I did in the actual books. And I still haven't done anything in the Through the Seasons one. Do let me know in the comments if you'd like to see me fill out this book a bit. Maybe a 4 seasons video or something. I was also inspired to create my own reverse colouring page, and here is my lovely painting, which actually matches quite well with this hearts one. I guess I was inspired by those particular colours, although mine are a little bit different. Not quite as rainbow. I'll of course post links for all of these books in the description below, including the Watercolor With Me in the Forest, which is the one I started off with. There's a reminder of that painting, so I've been a busy bee in this video. I had such a great time filming this, but wait, there's a little bit more. I've actually done some other reverse colourings in my sketchbooks, and I thought I would show you some of those examples. This crazy one here, which is in a sketchbook I haven't actually shown on the channel. It's not the best sketchbook in the world, and I'm just trying to get through it. It actually worked well for reverse colouring though. I also have in my current sketchbook that I'm working in, and it's taking forever to get done, these colourful ones with feather designs. I love this page spread, and you can get quite intricate with the inking on the reverse colouring pages. Just put a whole load of colour down on the page, let it dry, and then draw over the top of it. In my larger Hannah Muller sketchbook, which I'm also trying to finish, I've done a few reverse colourings lately. This one's meant to be an abstract meadow with a sunset kind of sky, I don't know. I've also got this one with a slightly more geometric pattern to it. I really like how that one turned out. Once again, a floral design, I can't get away from those. And then my 2025 page, I didn't know what to do for this, so I just did a reverse colouring, add paint on, and then worry about the lines later. And that's everything I've got for today. I absolutely love these books. I'm so glad I finally bought them for myself, and I also really like this Watercolor With Me one too. Thank you so much for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, I'd really appreciate a thumbs up. You might also want to click subscribe for more videos in the future, and I'll put a couple of other videos up here for you to watch next if you like, and I'll see you all again really soon in my next video. Swatch you later. Bye!